housing, health, education, criminal justice reform, and economic mobility. Now what happened was PolicyLink came out with this big broad framework of 8 issue areas, but for Cincinnati we said, hey, those are the issues we need to focus on. That's where we need the most help from you, PolicyLink. So it was an interesting discussion and debate process with community members and with funders kind of coming up with that list. But then once we had that list, PolicyLink said, hey, well, we're working in Oakland and New York and New Orleans, and here's what we're seeing in those cities, and here's what we think may work in Cincinnati as well. But they said, before we do that, we need to come to Cincinnati. We need to experience Cincinnati for ourselves. We need to sit down with you and your networks, and we need to sit down with decision makers and just get their sense for what is happening in Cincinnati. So the core team came up with a list of 25 people who weren't necessarily already at the table with us, but who we felt should be a part of this, at that point, research project. So I did have some slides that had a list of all those 25 people, just in case you were wondering. But I don't have all those names memorized. But what was interesting from that conversation with those focus groups was that what didn't come up in the conversation was race. So when PolicyLink reported that out to us, we said, well, what city were you talking to? Because that's just not the case here. And then we had to look back at ourselves and look back at the questions that we had given and the questions that were asked. And we said, well, we didn't really name it specifically ourselves. But we knew with this work that we had to lead with race, put race at the center. Because when you look at the data, it's clear that people of color, and specifically black women, are struggling in Cincinnati. And I was so proud of the core team of leaders who said, hey, we need to hone in on that and do something about that. And just name it, put it out front. And in fact, when PolicyLink said, who's your target population? Who are you trying to work with? Who are you? The answer that we gave them was, okay, we need to focus on supporting black women, lifting up black women, because with that, we get to exemplify what PolicyLink calls as the curb cut effect. So it's like, who can you help? And helping that group with that demographic, you help many others through helping them. So that was a breakthrough moment really for us as a group when we said, hey, we're going to be bold enough and courageous enough to really just name solutions.
Can I add something on that? We use a concept called targeted universalism. And it was put out by John Powell, who used to be at Ohio State, but now is in
Berkeley.
I think Berkeley, right. And what he said was, he gave the example, if you have a group of students and 80% of them are proficient and 20% of them are not, who do you need to focus on to take you to 100%? You need to focus on the 20% because 80% are going to be proficient. So you got to make sure they stay proficient, but you need to understand that if you really want to change, and you talk about move the needle, as people say, drives me crazy, but if you really want to move the needle, then what you have to do is focus on that 20%. And so that's why we chose, the data told us to choose black women as our target, because that will help everyone. That will lift the whole boat. You know, and so just so people, because people said, what? So the data told us that more than anything else. You know, but in doing that, that doesn't mean leave out other people. It simply means that they are our target population, and if we measure them, we'll know that the community is getting better. You know, so I just wanted to.
So can you just clarify the process? So PolicyLink as a national organization comes in and does some analysis. There's focus groups on the ground, and then the data is coming from PolicyLink, or the data is coming from all sorts of sources?
Right. Census data.
Census data, okay. Yeah. So just all the data that we already have.
Yeah, this is not necessarily new data. Right?
Okay.
It's just disaggregated and localized.
And, and so out of this, you're saying, okay, the heaviest burden of poverty is falling on black women?
A lot of inequities.
A lot of inequities.
Because they tend to, the poverty is only one form of inequity. It's usually an income inequity that you're talking about when you're measuring that. There's housing, there's health, there's all of the 5 areas that we talked about. And black women are at the bottom of the barrel of all these stuff. You know, and so it doesn't, so if you organize the data based on disparities, that's what we easily saw. And that's what drove us forward in terms of naming black women as our target.
And do you focus in on a certain age demographic of black women, or you're saying that It's broad enough to just say black women.
No, it's broad enough to say black
Yes,
women.
so it's not just like black women with young children.
But
or
it
black
doesn't mean that you won't do, you might not pinpoint that along the way, but the bottom line is what we know is if we lift the black women in total, then we're gonna be lifting the entire community.
Right. And the report's been out for about a month, so it's a gift to the community, and there's still some discussions about how people are going to use it within their own organizations.
Yeah.
So there's how All-In is going to use it, but then there's an invitation for other people to partner with us on it. So there's this 17, 18-page kind of narrative summary, then there's a 100-page data set.
Yeah.
So there are clear indicators in this. Some of the points from that is that housing insecurity disproportionately burdens black women in Cincinnati. In terms of renters who pay more than 30% of their income on housing by race and gender, black women are at 63%. Black men are at 54%. White women, 43%. White men at 28%. So as we got into the data, we just kept seeing the same piece. Black women who rent, these are more likely to be housing cost burden, with more than 6 in 10 paying more than 30% of their income toward housing.
And this is the new study that you're reading from.
Yeah, so within 2 months of having a contract with policy, they said, well, here's the census data for Cincinnati. Now we need to put some narrative around it and check it against what the lived experience is. We were very clear that there were so many good reports that have already been done on this issue in this area that was not our focus. Our focus was on how do we build relationships with coalitions and civic leaders who are already working on these issues, already know this data, but may be operating in a silo, or may want to improve their own advocacy skills, or may want to have connections with groups that represent intersectional work. So not just housing, but housing and jobs, so not just health, but health and education. So that's where the impetus of our work came. How do we, excuse me, how do we work together? And how do we take these 3 institutions, funding institutions, and also see how these institutions can operate in a more collaborative way.
Got a quick question. Sorry.
What were the 3 institutions, I'm sorry? United Way,
Yes.
Foundation, and Interact?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are the institutions that contracted with PolicyLink to produce the report, and then PolicyLink was able to go get some national funding to provide more capacity building and coaching, and to bring us from Cincinnati to different locations for training and to connect with the civic leaders from other cities who say the 3 again?
Yeah.
Yes, Interact for Health, United Way, and Greater Cincinnati Foundation. And that's to date. There may be others that join in the future, but that's how it has been so far.
Yeah, I'm curious to understand the areas that you listed when we first started: health, housing, education.
That's right.
And I can't think of the rest of them. Did you state those in order of priority, or they just were things that you?
When we first connected with PolicyLink, they had 8 issue areas, and they were not in issues in order of priority. In our conversations, we identified housing as an issue that touched the other issues the most. But I wouldn't say that it was priority, because we have members of our organization, members of our coalition that they are the advocates for criminal justice reform.
Yeah, I only said that, make the statement because when you look at trying to solve poverty long term, so there are certain things that has to be at the beginning, the starting gate, to address all the other areas.
Yes.
You say housing, somebody might say education, because education would allow for you to have opportunity to down the road own a house.
Yes, sir.
I would kind of challenge the notion that they have to be in order. Actually, they have to be done all at the same time,
Yeah.
to a certain extent. Now that doesn't mean that All-In has to do all of them at the same time, but what we want to do is make sure that we're connected with people who are doing it, so that because the intersectionality of equity, and that means that all of those things are important and they all have to be addressed. And so the question is how so All-In provides the opportunity for that kind of discussion to occur going along the way. So it's never that we'll deal with one thing, but we want to be able to have the conversation so we understand what's going on across the community and how one area might be affecting another area, so that when we propose policies, we won't be doing more harm than good.
The census years don't seem, or the study years don't seem to link up with the census data. Is there something I'm missing there? Normally, there's the 10-year census, and then there's
The annual.
the community, whatever it is, the five-year census.
Right.
That's the annual.
Which would
Yeah, I
be-
mean, they used the data that was most recent that they could get access to that had been disaggregated by race and gender. So that was not, so that adds a couple of years for that to happen. That's how they explained it to us, because we made that same point, like, hey, this is kind of old.
Yeah.
Can we have 2017? And they're like, well, it does take us time to crunch the numbers. And I said, oh, okay.
Thank you.
And those are just only crunching numbers, because they're not really, they're just projections based on the thing, whatever algorithm they're using to do it for that particular year.
So in our conversations with our core team and our coalition, after we had back and forth about the order, we realized that, hey, we just want to hold this space to make sure that equity is a part of all these conversations, because oftentimes it is not. We want to make sure that these conversations are intersectional, because oftentimes they're so focused on one particular issue. So then the conversation became, how do we become advocates for equity and better advocates for working in coalition, for working in collaboration? And then the clear request came, hey, we need training. We need trainings around advocacy. We need trainings to understand the history of racial equity in this city. And that's where we are right now. I spent a couple of days in Austin, Texas, a couple of weeks ago, and it was good to be in a city that was kind of more, that had done this, that was ahead of us to a certain extent, and they were